Hey team, and welcome. I'm your host, Carrie, creator of Mother Life, your destination for all things real talk and parenting. This is the IRL group chat, where we talk about the wild balancing act of pursuing careers and passions while also doing our best to show up for our kids. Join me every week as I sit down with some badass parents in my closet and we talk about their careers, kids, and relationships and all of the weird shit that comes up when you're trying to balance the seemingly impossible. As seems to be the natural order of things, kids find a few things really very comforting. Schedules, predictability, and paradigms. That makes sense, because they're learning the world, and the world on the face of it is rarely so neatly scheduled, predictable, or do things fit so neatly in pre-made boxes. But the older we get, as parents and just as people, the more we're forced to live with the discomfort that exists outside of the schedules and preordained patterns. You can't force a timeline on your life, and when you do, it often doesn't lead to the happiness or fulfillment you thought it would. Doing things or following convention because you're supposed to, rather than because maybe you want to, rarely leads to inner peace. Today's guest embodies all of the good stuff that happens when you deviate, when you go outside of the patterns and plans. In his professional life, he and his lifelong collaborators doggedly pursued what they knew was good, rather than what was going to be profitable. And what do you know? They were able to achieve both. In his personal life, he and his family have built a new paradigm that works for them, keeping the focus on what matters most, making sure everyone feels loved and respected and included. David Zucker is a man that requires no introduction for fans of comedy, or film in general, really. He's a director and a screenwriter and a genre-building mind. His films and his work as part of the writer-director trio Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker, Zazz for short, are still some of the most quotable of all-time comedy fame. Kentucky Fried Movie, Airplane, Naked Gun, Scary Movie, Police Squad, to name a few. The trio's recent book, Surely You Can't Be Serious, on the making of their iconic film Airplane, covers so much about what it takes to bust open a whole new film genre. And today we get to dive into what makes David's outlook on parenting so special. Enjoy. Are you ready to hang out?
I'm ready, sure. Yeah.
Welcome to the closet, David.
Sure. Yeah.
Very happy to have you here. When you are at this stage of having kids and stuff, this is the only part of my house guaranteed where I will be left alone. So if I'm going to have people here, it's like, okay, well, the closet is the place to do it.
And because there's clothes, so it's naturally soundproofed. It's really, I imagine it sounds good.
It does.
Yeah.
Your dulcet tones will come across beautifully to our listeners. Okay, so we're going to start with young David growing up in Wisconsin, right?
That's right, yeah.
And then we're going to get all the way through to today. Because one of the things, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are like me, who have kids who are in that sort of early stage. And a lot of the things we think about are like, how do we maintain and build a relationship with our kids so that when they are older and grown up, they still like kind of like us and want to hang out with us sometimes. And
I never thought about that, but yeah.
But like
it just happens, I guess.
So, but I think there's some stuff to pull out and we'll try and get there together.
Sure.
So let's start with you growing up.
Yes.
So you grow up in a house, you've got two siblings and a mom and a dad.
Right.
In Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee, it was a suburb called Whitefish Bay.
And what was it like in terms of life there? You're from a Jewish family. Was it very Jewish? Was it diverse, pretty white?
Well, it was certainly all white. It was a very, Leave It to Beaver type of family. A lot of kids on the block, and we all played games out. And when it got dark, your mom called you. and it was and it was different. We also walked to school, and that was about 8 blocks away.
I thought you were gonna say it was 8 miles uphill both ways.
It was 8 blocks, but 8 blocks in the snow.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it could really get snowy. But I mean, that's what I remember about it. And then when I was in 3rd grade, we moved to the next suburb south, which was called Shorewood.
And similar Leave It to Beaver vibes.
Yeah. And we moved into what had been my grandmother's house.
And was your mom a stay-at-home mom?
Yes, she was until I was about 13, and then she taught school.
And what about your dad? What was he doing?
He was he was working. He had inherited my grandfather's business, which was retail clothing, and it wasn't very good by that time. The neighborhoods where all of my grandfather's stores were just going to shit, and so my dad had to take it over, and he ended up trying to make it go with 3 stores after they got rid of 15 of them or something. And that was very hard. He didn't like the schmata business.
Yeah.
So he got into real estate after that.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
And so growing up, was it the sort of thing where like he was home for dinner, you all sat down at the table together? Or...
Yeah. when we were really young, he was home for dinner. Then he was working so hard and right through high school, and he was rarely home for dinner. He was just
grinding,
just grinding until, he finally got success later. When I was, halfway through high school, and but it was they really struggled for when I was in middle school and early high school, and so I remember that. Although the house was a mansion, because it was my grandmother's house.
Right. There's like a little bit of dissonance there. Do you at the time, did you like know like, oh, my parents are kind of struggling, or is that something you sort of figured out in retrospect?
No, I think we knew at the time, but they mostly kept us isolated from any kind of struggle like that.
What kind of parenting sort of style did you grow up receiving? Was it very...
My mom was strict, cared about our grades, and my dad, really didn't seem to, be that concerned about it. So, when I would get B's, my sister got a lot of A's, and my brother was about the same as I was, and my mother was the disciplinarian. Except when I did something really bad, then
Dad got called in.
Yeah, and then he really didn't do, because I figured that anything I did, he probably did as bad or worse. And that's the same thing how I treated my kids when they were in high school. When they went off the road a little bit, then I think that we were, well, both of us were, very easy with it. And one thing I learned, is, since you're asking, is to forgive them. And because my mother never forgave me, so it took some amount of shrinkage later.
Shrinkage.
Where I had to work that out. And because my mother, she would get really mad and everything, but it was never resolved.
Interesting.
And that was, so I was sure I learned a lot of stuff from my parents, both positive and negative. And so when I made sure to, first of all, not lose it. I don't think I ever lost my temper with the kids.
That's impressive.
And yeah, I just except I was pretty angry when Charles crashed his car, showing off for his friends.
That feels reasonable.
Yeah, and so I was mad about that. But there again, Danielle was, this
is your ex-wife, Danielle.
My ex-wife, who was great with the whole. Somehow, she knew that, we just cruised by this, and
sometimes like the fuck up is bad enough that the kid knows that this is really bad, and they can kind of sort of self-correct.
Yeah. And they, and the kids, being different as the kids are, they took it in different ways, So, but you get past it. But and then there were some other things that they did, none of which were worse than anything that I did. And so I made sure to just give them a hug and say, try not to do that again.
Right.
So, and like my dad said after he drove me home from the police station once, he said, next time, try not to get caught.
Perfect. But something that you said about your mom never forgiving you, something that I think this generation of parents is trying to do, and it sounds like you were ahead of the curve on this one with your kids, is like when we do fuck up or we do lose our temper, trying to say like, hey, kids, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I hate apologizing.
Have you ever wondered, wow, I would love for this podcaster to sell me something already? Well, you're in luck. Today I'm selling you on something highly exclusive, highly niche, highly Mutha. Just kidding, we're in the early stages over here, but if you've got a company or a cause you'd like to promote on the pod, get in touch. We're a good time.
Yeah, I hate apologizing, so I'll never say I'm sorry.
Right, you'd rather just not make the mistake in the first place.
Absolutely, that's what I'm about. I just don't want to make the mistake in the first place. I think rarely I ever said I was sorry to the kids, but also I never did anything
so egregious
so that I thought it, deserved an apology. So, but I was sure to forgive them that day. That's the best advice I could give, is to, not let it, I mean, and even in the first place, you don't want to say you jerk.
Right.
You can't, that really hurts, and it goes into them.
In deep, yeah.
Which is not, so no matter what they do, you have to trust that they aren't jerks. I mean, you never can tell when you're going to raise a serial killer, but that's,
sure. Statistically unlikely.
Yeah, but it happens.
Sure.
So, but basically, just make them feel that they're okay. And that's, I was not made to feel that I was okay.
Interesting.
So I was made to feel
like you were fucking up.
A bad kid. Yeah, it was, there's some bad stuff. Yeah.
And was it with you? Was she like that with all of you guys?
Yeah, but I was the one who was the most rebellious and the most
mischievous.
Mischievous. I think I was restless and bored. I got into trouble, and I was bored with not getting into trouble. So that was.
You needed the intrigue.
I needed that more than my brother, and I think more than Jim. I'm just looking for things to complain about, but I think she was 90% a great mom. But I was there.
Yeah.
I had a front row seat.
You could have used a little mush, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember the negatives.
Yes.
So that's and I'm nitpicking because boy, they were great parents. I had every advantage. Yeah.
And then, at what point do you discover this like mischief or this troublemaker has a place creatively?
Oh yeah, definitely. It that was, I always was, I had the imagination. I was the visionary of the group. I said, this is what we're going to do next. I had all the ideas, and whether they were good ideas or bad ideas, that's what we did. I was
like, how old were you when you were starting to, were you like putting on plays as a kid with your friends, skits?
Actually, from the time I was in 3rd grade and 4th grade, I started writing comic books. And all the kids were reading these comic books, and they were always funny. And I started clubs, and I was in the school talent shows. I did funny skits. I was just doing parodies of TV commercials in 2nd grade in gym class, and they couldn't shut me up. And the teacher called me Chatterbox, and so all the kids called me. That was my nickname. It was an affectionate nickname.
That's cute.
Think. Yeah. But I was known as Chatterbox, yeah.
And your brother, since, I mean, your sister's there, but it seems like you and your brother were really the co-conspirators creatively. I mean, certainly for your whole careers. Was he similarly drawn to it, or were you kind of drawing him into your shenanigans?
Jerry was, talented and funny and a personality all on his own. He didn't need me, but we did need each other. So it was, and with Jim Abrams, it was, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. And it was a magical combination. I mean, I'm so lucky to have had Jerry as my brother. And then, Jim Abrams was a close family friend. So it just, and we grew up with this kind of humor, and it came out of, the family dinner table. it was a pun fest, and we were trying to one-up each other on puns. I wish we had recorded any of them. Probably wouldn't be that funny today.
I don't know. I bet it would be pretty fun to listen back to. And then at what point do you go to your parents and say, I think I'm going to make this funny thing my career?
Well, I remember that pretty clearly. First, we started doing videotapes when nobody had videotape. My dad was able to borrow some videotape. They were these big box decks with reel-to-reel tape and a big camera that you had to put over your shoulder.
I mean, this is an expensive...
This was in 1971, and so we started experimenting with that. Jerry and I were doing that, and Jim, and then we got another kid who we knew from high school, Dick Chudnow, and we started a theater in Madison. And so at one point, I was working for my dad in construction. He was building office buildings, and so and at a certain point, I thought I needed to move up to Madison. So I said, I have to quit, and I'm going to move up to Madison and do this theater full time. So and my dad said I think he had dreams of taking me into the business, and we would work together and anything. But I really it was okay, but it was just a job. I really wanted to do this, and so he said. Another piece of good advice, he said, when you're 21, you're as smart as you're ever going to be, so you might as well try it. And so I never forgot that. And so I went to Madison, lived in Madison for a year. We did the theater, and then it was so successful in Madison. It was just one show a night, Friday and Saturday night, and so we moved the show to L.A., and then we were really doing it to make a living. Yeah.
Before we move forward from there, one of the things that's interesting, right, is your dad kind of got drawn into his family business, the schmata business, didn't love it.
No.
And then eventually figured out the thing he was really excited about and worked really hard at it. Right. And then his kid comes to him and he realizes he's holding on to this thing of maybe he'll work with me.
That's right, yeah.
And he sees this twinkle in your eye, and he on some level has to have thought back to like when he was your age and the path that was laid before him, and said like, well, actually I don't want my son, if he really wants to do something else.
I bet you he probably thought about that.
Right?
Yeah, that he didn't want to go into his father's business just because it was his father's business.
Right.
And my grandfather had one of his stores it was on the south side of Milwaukee, and it had a whole second floor of the building which was offices. And my dad said to my grandfather, "Why, if you let me run with this, I can rent these spaces out." And he really liked that. That's what he liked. So I'm sure that that component went into it when I came to him. I said, I want to do this thing, and even though what I wanted to do was it was impossible,
right?
And to anybody on the outside, and then people have asked me since then, what was your plan B? What was your, and we never had a plan B. We were so headstrong. We just thought, of course we're going to make it.
That's, I have a lot of respect for that. So you move here, you bring the show here.
Yeah.
And is it enough for you guys to like be feeding yourselves and having a roof over your head?
We each put in $3,000. Jerry and I borrowed it from my dad, and for the move out here, and we remodeled an old warehouse and made it into a theater, and by Christmas we were able to pay back my dad.
Wow.
Yeah, and he cried.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge moment.
Yeah, it's a huge moment. They were so proud of us. I mean, and when we left, and that was only the stage where we were able to feed ourselves and pay back the money and live doing the small theater. But our dreams were, we wanted to make it in the movie business. So it was a long, long ladder.
And so at what point do you go from the theater to making that leap? So you move here, it's 1970 what?
71.
72 you move here.
June of 72, in fact.
So 72 you move here, and then we've still got a chunk of time before we're seeing the
Kentucky
Zucker
Fried Movie.
Right.
Well, we did the theater for 5 years here, and I always thought, we were going to do movies it always took much longer than I thought. And And but in 1975, we recast the show and with other actors, and so we'd have time to write. And that's when we wrote Airplane. That was our first movie script.
Wait, that was your first movie
First
script?
movie script, but we couldn't sell it. It's like we had this thing, and it was much too impossible to sell at that time.
Right. So you have this thing. It's kind of, a genre-creating film in so many ways.
Nobody understood it.
Right.
We were going to do a comedy without comedians.
Right.
And they were going to, yeah.
And it's just, it's a type of comedy that hasn't really ever been seen on a screen before.
Right.
So when you're getting it to people, they're just like, I don't get it. Or
I guess they didn't get it.
Or is it too risky? Or
And that was even, but I don't blame anybody for not getting it. That first script, I think we had Beaver Cleaver flying down the plane. It was a crude forerunner, but it was based on that old movie called 0 Hour, which is we had the exact same plot. So so we couldn't sell it, and then we went back to doing the theater, and that was another crushing defeat for me, having to, I knew that we had something. We had machine guns in the Civil War, and so we went back to doing the theater, and then at some point John Landis came by, who we had known from before, and he was out of work, and he said, why don't you do a movie out of based on your show? And that became Kentucky Fried Movie, and John Landis directed it.
So you had somebody who was backing you and backing this particular thing that made it easier to kind of make your entry.
Well, Landis just was a director. We didn't have backing. We still needed to raise the money, and that
was
a whole other thing. So we scraped together enough money to do Kentucky Fried Movie, which was $600,000.
And then at that time, you're 26, 27. Are you dating? Are you thinking like, oh, maybe one day I want to have a family? Or are you just in the grind trying to make stuff happen?
Yeah, I was thinking, that was like maybe one day I'll have a family. But I was dating. I was always dating. But I didn't start to, it didn't get easy until I had made a movie.
That's so fucked up, no?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it, yeah.
That's the hard truth of it.
It's the hard
dating
truth
in
of
Los
it.
Angeles.
Dating in LA, and yeah.
And then you get this first movie made, which is a huge deal because we know how long and how impossible it is to get anything made.
Right.
And then how many years until we get to Airplane from there?
Well, then Kentucky Fried Movie was hugely profitable because it probably made $20 million.
Right.
It only cost $600 to make. We went back and we rewrote Airplane.
Yeah.
And by this time, we had completely closed the theater. We closed it, going into doing Kentucky Fried Movie. So we rewrote Airplane, and we still couldn't sell it. But at least we weren't doing the show.
Right.
And then finally, Michael Eisner somehow found out about the script, and after 10 studios turned it down, and so we were suddenly at Paramount, and that's how Airplane got made. And then the struggle was, they wanted to take us through a rewrite, and we wanted to, and that was okay with us because the rewrite was good. Paramount, the studio made it better. And then
Do you hear that? Wait, let's take a pause. The studio made it better.
The studio executives are not boobs. They're not morons. They're the smartest people. They were wonderful. I'm talking about Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Barry Diller and all these executives that we had who were, and Howard Koch, who was the past president of the studio. We insisted on directing. We just, and at one point we were ready to leave Paramount because they wouldn't let us direct. But finally they relented and they let us direct, and it was three of us. That had never been done before.
Right.
Yeah.
So you watch Landis direct Kentucky
we watched
Fried
Landis,
Movie.
yeah.
And as you're watching him, when does the light bulb go off that you knew you wanted to direct? Was that from the beginning?
I think it was from the beginning. I thought eventually we wanted to direct, but we didn't know how much we needed to direct, and it was important and absolutely essential that we direct. When we did the thing with Landis, and Landis did a great job, he added a bunch of jokes that we never would have thought of, but there was a third of it that we would have done differently. And we didn't want to go up to a guy and tap a guy on the shoulder and say,
right.
Can you please do this? You know,
right. Nobody wants to be that guy.
No. So we held out, and finally Paramount relented, and with the condition that they would put their guy, Howard Koch, who was this old guy. He was probably 61 or 62 at the time. And so it turned out he was a blessing. He was great. It was a miracle. I mean, if
kind of like a grandfatherly support.
And the Godfather, you know.
Right.
And when the studio wanted to cast like Barry Manilow and as the lead and all this crazy stuff, and we'd say, and we would go fly off the handle and say, well, we're gonna walk, you know. And Howard would say, just relax. I'll call their agents, and Howard would call the agent, or the other executive, Tom Perry, and just say, yeah, the script is good, but the guys, it's first time directors and they've never done a movie before, and this isn't really for you. They would actually tell Chevy Chase's agent, or
you don't want to put him in this.
You don't want to put him in this.
Amazing. So now we get to the experience of directing a movie with 3 directors.
Yeah.
And at this point, you guys have been collaborators for a long time.
Right.
And so did it come then very second nature when you get into this new role to know who to defer to when and who's going to take point?
Well, we had it all planned out. We would all confer in between takes, and then Jerry was the one who would actually talk to the actors, because the DGA was very strict about
Directors Guild of America.
Yes, and they're very strict about one man, one film. It's Frank Capra and the tradition, and they didn't even want to give us 3-man director's credit. Jerry was the only one who was allowed to talk to the actors. And actually, when there was no DGA representative on the set, we could all talk to the actors. It was so informal, and we didn't pretend that we knew everything or anything.
Yeah.
So, and always ask for advice from the crew and from the cameraman, and so it was very collaborative, as film is.
And so you have obviously this massive success.
Yeah.
And a genre is sort of born, really, at this point. And then you are a man about town in Hollywood, really. Now we can date. Now we can be out in the world, and you've got your friends, and you're all here together. Yeah.
Well, I had a girlfriend who I was with a couple of years before Airplane, or shortly before Airplane, and then and so we were going out. But I just had trouble breaking up with people, and so
because you didn't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah. After I learned that, often I would be in these long relationships. I wasn't like dating a different person.
Right.
Be in these long relationships that
serial monogamous.
Serial monogamy, exactly.
And then at what point does your ex-wife enter the picture?
This was in 1994, late 1994. I had just broken up with this person who I just referred to as the evil one.
Sure.
Yeah, and I it's the only person like that that I ever had. And but it's so evil and so bad that I won't even say her name. And so, but she was manipulative, everything bad. But
toxic relationship.
I was, as old as I was.
How old were you at this point?
In 94.
Late 30s?
No, I think I was late 40s.
Late 40s. Okay.
Yeah, but no, mid 40s. I was mid 40s.
Okay.
But early 40s when I got into this thing. Anyways, so I finally I got rid of her. All I can think of is the 2 feet under the house in Wizard of Oz, and so then I was in my house alone switching channels between David Letterman and Jay Leno.
Sure.
And there was an in between, as I was channel surfing, there was this cable access show from Orange County called The Love Channel, and it featured a K-Rock DJ named Poor Man.
Okay.
And a doctor, and they were giving out love, sex, and health advice. And the doctor was Dr. Danielle.
Oh.
And I loved the way she carried herself. She was smart. She was 26 at the time and doing her residency, I think, in Irvine. And she at least looked Jewish. So, and again, I'm just completely headstrong. I'm a crazy guy. I will do anything. And so I called up the DJ and told him who I was, and that I was thinking about doing a movie about a call-in show. And he got all excited, and he said, "Oh, you have to come down to see the show." I didn't tell her, and you can meet Dr. Danielle, and said, "Okay, I'll do that too,"
Oh yeah, I sort of know who she is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I went down and I just said, just don't call me out on the show. I don't need the publicity. And so, Jim Abrams' saying was always avoid embarrassment. That was his saying. And I always have that, and I channel that. Anyway, so I go down there and we still have the tape of the show. And he introduced, sure enough, he just says, and there in the audience,
oh, for fuck's sake,
the director, and so it's all on. We still have this on tape, and you see her looking out in the audience. Anyway, so we met after the show, and I asked her out, and 2 years later we were married.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, at what point did you say, Dr. Danielle, the real reason I came here today?
Our third date.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Very coy.
And she was disappointed.
She was disappointed
because she wanted to be she thought I was going to do the movie.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Okay, so she's 28 at this point.
She's 26.
Or no, when you get married.
When we got married, she was 28.
28.
I was.
You're late 40s.
I was late 40s. Yeah, 49. Yeah.
And at what point were you guys, thinking about starting a family?
I don't know what we were waiting for, but just a couple of years, we just wanted to start a family.
And what about the enterprise of parenthood or having a family? Was it just kind of like this is what you do? You have a family?
Yeah, I think, we were having a nice time, being single. We hung out with her sister and her sister's friend, Adam, who we're still close with them. But then Janine moved to Chicago to be in a relationship with some guy she knew there, and Adam got a girlfriend who he later married. So, Danielle and I were left to, each other. So we said, well, we should have a family.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
Well, I guess now's a good time.
Yeah. And so we had we had kids. Charles first. Yeah.
And in terms of sort of those early years, those are famously hard years. I'm currently in those years now. And what were your ideas about, like, okay, this is my job as the dad in this family? Like, we're talking like diaper changing age. Are you like in there slinging shit, doing the diapers?
I wasn't so much. I'll occasionally, but not really. And it wasn't tough for me. Danielle did most of it.
And for Danielle, promising, doctor, clever bean,
she stayed home. She's a doctor now, but
right.
she was stay at home.
She took a break. She stayed at home. How long did she stay at home for?
For about 15 years, I think.
And during that time, do you think it was like you were a good team in terms of how everything was divided? Like, for instance, and the reason why I ask is after I got my doctorate, I was working full time running a business for a consulting firm, and overnight My husband and I's careers changed. So I went on maternity leave with our first during COVID.
Right.
He sold his first spec, and overnight, after 10 years of trying to make it, like had his first big sale. And so overnight, he's taking calls and he is busy, and all of a sudden Dr. Carrie is no longer, and I am changing diapers. I have never wanted to kill my husband more than in that period when I wasn't working, and I was like, but I want to be working and I love my kids, but I don't want to do this all the time. Looking back, do you feel like she was like fully fulfilled being at home?
She was.
She loved it.
Yeah,
she was like, I'm happy to be here.
She was happy to be there. She did not especially like doctoring that much.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't like this,
Yeah.
career focused person. She more is now. She loves her career now, but then we had a nanny and a housekeeper.
So she had a lot of support, a lot of
There
help.
was a lot of support. Yeah.
So that's when the kids are small, and then you're married for a long time. What, over 20 years?
No, we were married for about. Things started going south around 7 or 8 years.
And what do you like looking back now? Can you guys identify? I know that you're still close and have a great relationship, and I want to get to that. But looking back now, are you like, oh, these were sort of the contributing things that started to make it go south? Because the 7-8 years, like you're coming up on a lot of me and my friends 7-8 years. So
they call it the 7-year itch.
They do. So what can we learn?
But no one did anything wrong.
Right.
All I'll say is, it's like she's such a good person, really, and just a great mom. But at some point, looking, I can only look back on it. I don't know if we were completely right for each other.
A good place to start for a divorce, I think.
Yeah. So and I think I was, I was really sad about it.
Yeah.
It was upsetting, and for about a year, and then, it's just, life goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just such an interesting time of life because there's, I think, these like moments in our lives where they're really formative for how we create our sense of self and our identity. You have like this phase. I think middle school is like a really big time where you're like, what kind of person am I? Like, who am I? Am I the funny guy? Am I serious? And then you go to college maybe, or you just kind of enter sort of your early 20s and you sort of do it again.
Yeah.
And then I think when you become parents, and then after you're out of like the thick of the shit of like the early parenting and you're starting to come out the other side, it's like another phase of reinvention of like, who am I now? And maybe I'm speaking just as a woman. I don't know if it's totally different for guys, but I feel like there are these cycles where we're constantly thinking like, well, who am I going to be in this season of my life, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like conscious, but it happens.
I think it just happens.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it that much. One thing that was our characteristic is our kids were never in a crib. Danielle didn't want them to be in a crib.
Oh, you were a co-sleeping house.
Yeah, we had the family bed, which. So I think you have to, and look at, I never did this before, any of it. So this was my only marriage, and so I think that if you do that, you have to like really be proactive about keeping up the relationship. So, and I'm not even saying, oh, that was a mistake. I think it was good for our kids. It may not have been the best thing for the marriage, but I think that you can't blame stuff on anyone.
No, of course not. But it's just an interesting perspective. Not to say that it had any massive contributing factor, but that it's something that you remember from those early years. Because right now we're living in a time where you have some people say, never let your kids sleep in your bed. Only let your kids sleep in your bed. If you don't let them sleep in your bed, they're going to be really fucked up. If you do let them sleep in your bed, like every voice has a place on the internet, right?
Yeah, I know. So all I can say is our kids are great. And, they turned out great. And I don't know if it's because of that or, because, they just watch us and, we're not crazy. So, I mean, and I think we kind of parented by example more than anything else.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that's super interesting, because again, we are coming up to that 7-8 year mark for a lot of our listeners, and some people are starting to get divorced.
Yeah.
And
oh,
some
good for them. Yeah.
I mean, whatever, it's life. But what is really wonderful to hear is this really nice relationship you have with your ex-wife, and how involved both of you are in your kids' lives.
Right. And
how did did you, when you parted ways, did you have this discussion of like, this is how we want to be with our kids, or did it just sort of organically happen?
I remember when we sat the kids down, and
how old were they? Ish.
Probably 6 and 8, something like that.
Okay.
Around there.
Sentient.
Yeah. And we said, I remember exactly what we said. We said, Mommy and Daddy aren't going to be girlfriend and boyfriend anymore. Yeah. And then, that to that effect, but we still love each other, everything that was true. My mom always said, always tell the truth, but don't always be telling it. So we told them what was.
Wait, I really like that.
Yeah.
Always tell the truth, but don't always be telling it.
Right.
I like that. So when you are going to speak, speak the truth.
Right.
But don't constantly.
You don't have to tell everything.
Everything all the time.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's like when somebody comes to me with a script and I have to read it, it's always so awkward for me because most of them are horrible. And
right.
So what I do is I pick out 2 or 3 things that were good, that I liked, and start with that. I said, first of all, I love the part about the thing, and I love this, and then it's very easy to say the rest of it. But unfortunately, I don't think it works as a whole piece or whatever I want to say.
Yeah.
But and in this talk we had with the kids, so I remember Charles just nods, and Sarah said, well, you're not going to get divorced, are you? I mean, a 6-year-old, I think she was 6 or 5 or something.
Sharp.
And so, and we said, no, we're not. And we were not, there were no plans to get divorced.
Interesting.
We were just going to be separated. We were still living in the same house. And I think she got an apartment so she could have a place to go to. And then for a while, we had what we called a kind of a weekend place, which was a house on the Venice canals.
Oh, cool.
So look, fortunately we had the means to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't that tough. And then eventually we bought, Danielle was able to get a house, really for it was a bargain on the next street over from where we live.
Amazing.
So the main thing that, divorce can be horrible and it could be good. I mean, this is as good as you can get, because for me, I never wanted to be a weekend dad. That would be horrible for me. And because Danielle and it never got to, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
It never got to that. It just kind of, grew apart, and, we were able to maintain our respect for each other and love. So I was there every morning for breakfast.
Wow.
While the kids were in grade school. I would take them to school, play them Beatles records on the way to school. And then, and I would be at the house every night for dinner, even when I had a girlfriend who lived in with me.
And so you guys were separated for, it was like a decade or something, right?
Yeah, I think it was about a decade before we got divorced. Yeah.
And in that period of separation, were the kids just like, I mean, obviously you're both dating, I'm assuming, during this time, this decade.
Yes. Yeah, we were. Yeah.
And the kids were just like, well, they're not divorced.
Yeah, right. They're not divorced. I mean, look, this is the new normal, whatever you grow up with.
Right. Yeah.
If your dad's a serial killer, then you go, okay, he's a serial killer, but he still loves me, or whatever.
Yeah, he's not killing me.
Yeah, he's not killing me. And so they saw, and mommy had some dates, and I mean, when Charles was 12, he came over to my house once, and I happened to have my girlfriend over, who was not living with me yet, but we had just started dating, and we were just sitting in the living room, watching TV, and he got upset.
Yeah.
And he left, and I said, Charles, you want to talk about this? No, no. And so he went home around the corner, and Danielle kind of explained to him, this is fine, it's okay,
Wow.
She, as opposed to, that rotten
Yeah,
jerk,
yeah. That filthy bastard.
She talked him off the ledge, and more, he gets used to that, and he's met all my girlfriends since then, and
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so how old are your kids today?
Today, Charles is 24 and Sarah's 22.
And are they considering careers in entertainment?
Charles is.
Yeah.
Charles is working at Warner Brothers as a script reader, and he also is directing an episodic television episode in Las Vegas. So
Cool.
I didn't want to encourage him to be in the business because I know
How hard it is.
So, and Danielle said, cool it, don't discourage him.
Right.
And she was right, and so I stopped discouraging him and lightly encouraged. But I don't want to encourage anybody. When I do Q&As, when we show the movie or one of the movies, and I always get the question, what advice would you give to a young person just starting out in the entertainment business?
Do you say get another job?
No, I said, the first time it happened, I said, quit now, you'll never make it. And
So charming.
it was a big laugh,
Yeah.
as you might expect. And so during the laugh, fortunately, I had time to think. And so I said, but if you can ignore that advice, you'll be halfway there. So I just don't want to be responsible. I have to tell the truth. I just can't say you do this or do that and you'll be successful. No.
Always tell the truth.
No, yeah. Always tell the truth, yeah.
And then what about your daughter? What is she showing interest in? Because both go to college?
Yeah, both went to University of Wisconsin, where I went.
Oh my God.
And my dad went.
You're all nuts. Everybody who went to Wisconsin
is that the impression? Yeah.
loves Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. It was great, although my 4 years in college were not nearly as fun as Sarah's 4 years in college. She did it. I mean, I'm so jealous. I hate her. She just had so much fun. She was in a sorority, and she met her boyfriend freshman year, who she's still with.
Wow.
And we love him, but I never tell her that because I learned that from my parents. Again, from the wrong thing to say.
So what's the takeaway?
The takeaway is never say he or she is great. Hold on to her. She's great. Never want to say that.
Because you'll break up with them the next day or what?
Well, whether or not they are great or not is up in the air. You don't know.
Right.
Nobody knows, and nobody knows what goes on in somebody else's relationship. Everybody seems happy and fine until the day you find out, oh, they got divorced.
Yeah.
I'm the piano player in the whorehouse. I don't know what's going on upstairs, and I'm always surprised at people. They're getting divorced. Oh, they seem so happy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No. It's a really good point.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But I have Sarah's boyfriend.
Sarah, don't listen to this podcast. Your dad does not like your boyfriend. In fact, he doesn't remember his name.
If I didn't like him, I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
But I would visit Sarah in Madison, and I would have lunch with him, and he's not intimidated by me. He's just regular guy.
Yeah.
If I were him, I'd be afraid of me, but he's not, and he's just such a great guy, and he comes over, and they're still together, so and he lives in Chicago. She lives in New York.
Wow.
And she has a job with Paramount, CBS Sports, and he's in Chicago, and they see each other every 2 weeks. You know, she flies there, he flies, and then and he comes over to visit us when she's in LA, and we'll sit out on my screened-in porch, and we'll have a cigar, and he's great.
That's really nice.
It's kind of cool to have a son-in-law.
Right.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
But I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
He's okay.
I'm not saying if it works, I can't see it not working out because he's never going to find anything better than her.
Aww.
She is world class beauty.
Aww.
I'll show you a picture later.
Okay, I want to see a picture. I absolutely want to see a picture. Yeah. And so now in this sort of chapter of parenting, you've got adult children who are young adults. They're kind of finding their way into the world.
Right.
And what is the relationship like now? How often are you talking to them? Are they asking you for advice? What's sort of your role now in this season of parenting?
I don't think that it's changed very much. It's like, Sarah and I bond over watching Green Bay Packer games. She's a Packer fan, and Charles couldn't care less. I kept thinking, no, it's the son who's going to be the Packer, the football buddy. But no, Charles is into, other things, and, and Sarah. And so I still feel like I'm their father. You can't.
Turns out you are.
Yeah. But it's it's different than my dad. My dad wore a suit to work every day. It was like different. It's like my dad was not a goofball, although he was funny.
Right.
But he's not a goofball like I am. And so I sometimes wonder, how are they growing up, looking at me? I mean, Danielle's the straight ones. So, yeah. And she's also very funny. She makes me laugh. Yeah.
And how often, now that the kids are out of the house, how often do you and Danielle talk, see each other? Are you still living one street away from each other?
One street away. And we talk every week. And then the kids had these 2 little Pomeranians, which are still at her house. And so when Danielle's working all day, she doesn't want to leave them alone. So she'll bring them over to my house, or I'll come and pick them up.
So you have some joint custody of some
we
Pomeranians?
Have joint custody of these Pomeranians. And so.
That's really nice. And then now looking forward for your kids, I often ask guests who have younger kids, what do you want for your kids when they're grown up? Well, you have kids who are grown up now. What is it that you kind of have hoped for them in terms of what kind of people they'll be and what kind of future they'll have?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I know what kind of people they are now. I mean, they're really good kids, and that's really what I wanted for them, is just to be good people. That's just, and it's tough sometimes growing up in LA with the fancy cars and the fancy houses, and so to maintain a good value system.
Yeah.
So I've tried to do that and lead them by my example. Danielle and I do not drive fancy cars, although the houses are great, but they're not mansions. They're just I bought my house in 2002, and it was probably a teardown, but I kept adding to it and building second stories and all. It's a wonderful house now, and I never had to tear it down.
Something nice there.
So it's become a hobby. Construction, which I kind of inherited from my dad.
Oh my God, David, this is great because my house is falling apart. So
oh, just fix it. It's wonderful to keep it.
Great. I'll get your advice after this. It makes me so happy when I see somebody who has a great relationship with kids, and the fact that you have this relationship with your ex-wife and you guys are still teammates is unbelievable.
And our kids like us, and I should add that we go on family vacations together.
Like
and Danielle and I sleep in the same bed.
Oh, well, okay. All right. This sounds like it's a whole other podcast.
But there's nothing going. It's like we're brother and sister. And I did same thing with my ex-girlfriend who still lives with me.
Okay, David, we can't. We're not signing off quite yet. So when we're going on family vacations, it's the whole it's the four of you.
It's the four of us, and then our friends, neighbors from the Smiths, and their two kids who grew up with our kids.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
And what happens if either of you are dating somebody seriously? Do they come on the vacation too?
No.
Your face, you guys, David's face right now was like, of course they wouldn't come on vacation with us.
No, that would be not cool. I mean, it's or Thanksgiving. We're doing Thanksgiving at her mom's house. We're going with the kids. We'll all be in town, and so. But I wouldn't bring my girlfriend, and she wouldn't bring her boyfriend.
Okay. And are either of you in relationships right now?
Yes, both of us are. Yeah.
And the people you are in relationships with are like, cool, we won't do Thanksgiving together or go on family vacation together. Is that just part of the deal?
I haven't asked her about her friend, but certainly the person that I'm dating, well, she has an 8-year-old son who they're having Thanksgiving.
Right.
Yeah.
That took care of that. I would say, though, it's important to note that all of my listeners are too old for you because we're all probably late 30s now. I know that's a little bit above. Just kidding.
Cool, Mike.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
This is such a fascinating family dynamic, but I think the through line here is if you love your kids and you respect your partner or ex-partner and you remember why you loved each other in the first place, you can kind of make anything work.
Yeah, and I have no regrets either. I mean, I'm so happy that I chose well. I mean, Danielle's is the finest person ever and the best mom ever, so yeah.
What's funny hearing you talk about all of this, David, is it kind of sounds like a really successful marriage.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah. I mean, minus the, not... But, like, it kind of sounds like a really successful marriage,
It does.
Honestly.
Yeah.
So, families come in all shapes and sizes, and this podcast highlights that every week. And I'm so glad that we got to capture your story today. This was wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And so unexpected. The holidays together, the vacations with the sharing the bed, that really that was not on my bingo card today. But anyway, thank you so much for being in the closet. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mothership, I need your help. If you love it here, please like and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to the Substack for full access to this episode's show notes and join the discussion. And of course, follow me on Instagram at mutha.life for a daily look at all